Welcome back to page 121. Today we're going to go back to my battered copy of Against the Giants, and we're going to go to Adventure 2 in the Glacial Rift of the Frost Giant Jarl. This is a brutal adventure, one I've run many times, one I've played in a couple of times. I'm going to go ahead and run through the adventure and see why this one's even tougher than the steading of the Hill Giant Chief. This one, because it's in the cold, the environment becomes an opponent as well as the creatures in the Glacial Rift. I just want to take a mention. I am running a Patreon right now. This is the commercial part of the video. I apologize, but in order to keep producing videos the level I've been producing them and hopefully improve the technology and even the subjects, I do need a little bit of help. If you could take a look at the Patreon, if there's any way you can help out, that'd be wonderful. So that's it for that pitch today. The Glacial Rift of the Frost Giant Jarl by Gary Gygax. Okay, going into the Against the Giants, first I want to show off this guy. This is actually the Frost Giant Jarl. I got him in a blind pack of the D&D pre-painted stuff in the early 2000s. I was always kind of pleased to have gotten him. So he's going to be out here as our little totem today. So this is part 2 of the adventures Against the Giants. This is module G2, the Great Glacial Rift of the Frost Giant Jarl. This is brutal. I did the Hill Giants one a couple weeks ago, and there was a lot of interest in me continuing on, so here I am. I want to point out, first off, you can tell this is old D&D because none of the interior maps on the gatefold, the dungeon gatefold, or the interior are labeled. You got to kind of figure it out through context. So this is the Frost Giant Jarl's set of maps. This is where you come in. This is the big glacial rift, and then there's some subterranean areas that you're playing around in. This is a brutal module. Make no mistake. This is a challenge for your players. I have played in it first as a player, and then later played in it ran it as the DM. I can tell you this is a very tough one. It was especially tough in the early 80s because we didn't have a lot of rules on cold damage, freezing damage, that sort of stuff. Because of that, we couldn't rule some of the stuff. So, for instance, there's a section here where, let me find it. There's a section on falling. Here it is. If more than half the party goes over the edge, all fall. Each member falling to the bottom of the rift takes 1d6 die of damage for every 10-foot falling distance. 10 dice maximum due to the cushioning effects of snowdrifts. This caused a lot of problem for years in my D&D campaign because I had players that were constantly insisting this meant that it was 10 die 6 maximum damage from falling, which of course it's not. Ignoring the last part of the due to cushioning effects of snowdrifts. This became such an argument point that if I was running a campaign where there was a chance of falling any significant difference, I would go ahead and say right away, by the way, damage will be X. Don't worry about what it says in that module. So it was kind of the thing I had to do a disclaimer on real quick to avoid any kind of arguing. I want to point out, too, I make it sound like all I did was fight in early D&D. I ran a lot of different games with a lot of different groups in early D&D. I've talked about that club that I belonged to in the early 80s. I was in that from 81 to 85. That is where most of this kind of stuff came from. Lots and lots of rules lawyers were popping up at clubs, just as they do at Warhammer. You get people that are trying to twist and bend the rules to their own benefit. It was the same thing for D&D back in the day. This was not my core group as such. I had the conversation with one or two, but it was never a fight. Okay, so basically, you've teleported from the steading of the Hill Giant Chief to just outside the lair, or the Glacial Rift of the Frost Giant Jarl. Jarl, by the way, Jarl, means leader, boss, chief, whatever you want. I had to look that up back when I had this module. And the idea is you're going to find a secure cave not terribly far from the entrance, and then you're going to do your various forays into here, and then retire to the cave. Now, for whatever reason, the Giants don't pursue, in the module, the Giants don't pursue the players into the cave, even though they'd be easy to follow, easy to find because of all the snow. The Giants never assault the players in the cave. Well, no, they do in my game. So that's one thing to keep in mind. If your players are going to strike and withdraw, there's a good chance they're going to be followed and they're going to be struck while they're trying to rest. This can become a very lethal dungeon very quickly. One of the other opponents that's always present in every combat is the cold. You have cold, you have ice, you have snow. We didn't have proper rules for dealing with all that stuff back in the day. The Wilderness Survival Guide, yay, took care of a lot of that, and I've applied a lot of the WSG stuff to this module, and it really breathes a whole bunch more cold life into this module. But be prepared. You're going to have yourself ready to deal with slipping and falling on ice, visibility, sound, even avalanches. It's all going to pop up as you run this. I'm not going to run through every single encounter. I'm just going to point out that the wandering encounters are 2 to 5 Yeti, 1 to 3 Frost Giants, 4 to 16 Ogres, and 2 to 8 Winter Wolves. This is not easy. These are all first edition stats, but they're first edition characters. There's not a ton of hit points in a party, even a party going 8th to 12th level. It's easy to get overwhelmed in these simply by attrition. So as we're going through here, we get the darkened items in here, rather, are magic items that you can get. Battle Axe +1, Scroll of Protection from Elementals, it doesn't say what kind. Armor of Vulnerability, it's cursed, it's -2. You need to remove curse to get that guy off. If you use a fireball in a lot of these areas, not only do you destroy the magic items that are described in the area, you, in my opinion, run the risk of collapsing that chunk of the dungeon, the caves, or melting the floor out of the cave and maybe dropping yourselves down into a lower level. Maybe putting yourselves in a nice slippery bowl of water that's quickly freezing. There are a lot of problems with using fireballs, fire spells, and lightning bolts in this game. There are a lot of giants in this game. It is not uncommon to run into 8, 10, 12 frost giants in one shot. I have beefed this up and used 2nd edition frost giants in it, even with Unearthed Arcana and all the powers that were added to that and everything else. This becomes a very deadly module very quickly. It's pretty nice. You have your descriptions of the various. It's a dungeon crawl, a cavern crawl, if you will, since these are all ice caverns. But because of the ice, I ruled that the sound travels, and it travels far. But my players said, "Well, wait a minute, it would be confusing." And I said, "Well, wait a minute. We've got frost giants who've grown up in this environment their whole lives." I ruled that they'd be pretty good at figuring out the origin of an echoing sound. Maybe not exact, but they get an idea where it came from. That became a real problem for the party because one of the groups I ran in this was about 12 players strong, but all they wanted to do was go in and brawl. And they went in and brawled and they got creamed. Don't go in and brawl. Take your time, use your spells carefully. I do want to point out the picture I just turned from. This is a neat little depiction of various frost giant victories against giant dragons and things like that the players see. That's in one of the encounters on this page. So again, this was a kind of confusing the way it was laid out, but it was early D&D. I'm not going to complain. I love it. One of my favorite encounters here, you have the Visitor's Cave. You have various giants that are coming here to pay their respects. In this case, you have 5 stone giants who are paying their respects to the frost giant in area 25. 24, you have 5 hill giants who are paying their respects. So you're not just meeting frost giants in this one. And one of the most devious encounters is the Remoraz in the snow-covered dome of ice. If you survive this, and it's not easy, I killed a lot of players with this encounter. I took a lot of damage in this encounter as a player. One of the magic items you retrieve is a Ring of 3 Wishes. Now, I don't know about you guys, but wishes in my game are pretty darn strong. They have to be worded properly, and I do work with and against the player in that I make the player write the wish down on a piece of paper and then recite it to me word for word. I will let the player work with the other players to decide the exact wording of the wish. But once the wish is spoken, the power is given, and if I've found a flaw in there, believe me, I exploit it. I now play with very experienced players who have had wishes in the past, and they know better than to rush it. But it's something you can have some fun with less experienced players. So Ring of 3 Wishes, I don't let the wish just suddenly, I wish I knew everything about the steading of the Hill Giant Chief or the Glacial Rift of the Frost Giant Jarl. I don't allow that kind of stuff with it. But you can wish yourself to the strongest encounter of the game, or wish to go face to face to the Frost Giant Jarl. Anything that you want along those lines, I do allow. So now we get to the key of the lower areas. And as I showed in the inner gatefold on this. Here is the map to the lower areas. And we're going to meet the actual Frost Giant Jarl himself. And these guys are no walk in the park. You get some pretty nasty stuff waiting for you in this. In the vaulted cavern, you've got a medium-sized, very old female dragon. You've got another male dragon in here. This is a nasty dungeon. Run properly, this dungeon is almost as lethal as Tomb of Horrors. We have an emissary's cavern with 5 ogre magi. If you've ever run ogre magi in your campaign, you know these guys are very dangerous. Can cause a lot of damage. We're coming into the prison cavern. I bring this up because in here there's a comely storm giantess who is here, and the frost giant is trying to make her his wife, and he's going to then have a connection to the storm giants through that. If she is freed, she actually becomes a friend of the players and will actually work with the players through some of the rest of the dungeon, but more importantly later. I use her as a significant NPC in a campaign where she gave the players a nice conduit into the storm giants and the stuff that they could unlock, and once they were high enough level to deal with it. So that's a very important encounter. And then we come here, we get into the Great Cavern, which is the Great Cavern of the Jarl. This is his meeting hall. All kinds of stuff in here. His audience alcove and throne dais. Lots of treasure to be had here. The Frost Giant Jarl himself is here. We have a couple of Frost Giants here. Common giant quarters, 1 male and 12 female giants. The Jarl's hunting pack of 4 huge polar bears are here. His personal guard, you get males and females, you get younglings. The Jarl's anti-cavern and trophy room. There is some nice treasure to be had in here. You get into his private cavern. Again, this is very Gygax in that you are in here and you're getting stuff, but you pull off the shield off the wall, and a missile shoots you, a spear blasts you and does damage. Another one yells as you remove it. You get potions here. You get all kinds of treasure. You get a curse scroll, a protection from magic scroll, explosive runes. You get the new spells, Crystal Brittle and Energy Drain, first brought out here. That's pretty sweet. So you do get some nice spells. The Frost Giant Jarl himself is a massive encounter. This guy is dangerous. He goes, let me find his entry here. So the Jarl here, he's got 80 hit points, and he's got a couple of magic items that he uses, +4 two-handed sword. His lady is there. She's got a cloak of saber-toothed tiger hide about her and an iron mace in her hip. These are very dangerous creatures. This is the Frost Giant Grugner, and he fights the Cloud Giant with respect to his damage, so 6 to 36, and then he gets +4 for the sword. And his wife fights the Fire Giant. So you've got winter wolves in here. You've got all kinds of stuff. You've also got him yelling and screaming, bringing guards in. This is a very dangerous module. Between the environment, which is very deadly, and the tons and tons of hit points of the monsters in this game, in this module, your players are going to have a hard time. I would recommend being somewhere around 10th to 12th level before taking this on, or having a bunch of players. If you have 10 or 12 people who are playing in your game, some games play where each player takes 2 characters in. We've done that in the past. It's nothing I like to do. I find it distracting, but you can do that as well. I recommend you have resources and hit points for this. If you don't, you will come to a very bad end rather quickly. And if you strike and leave, intelligent monsters, and I play these as intelligent, will follow you to your lair, and they will attack you in the lair, or better still, just keep you in. They'll starve you out, literally. So you got to be careful with this module. There are a lot of ways for it to go very bad for the players very quickly. For the next module, we are going to the Halls of the Fire Giant King, which will be coming up here. Hall of the Fire Giant King. In this one, there is a giant rod that is coming down. It moves down out of the ceiling. It's huge, and anybody standing under the rod, it's basically a teleport pad. And it will teleport you to 50 feet or so outside of the Hall of the Fire Giant King. And that's where you'll pick up the next one. So it's really easy for the players to get from place to place in this one. The bad news is they don't get a lot of respite between the studying the Hill Giant Chief, this, and the Halls of the Fire Giant Chief. So, but this ends the expedition to the Glacial Rift of the Frost Giant Jarl. Love this artwork. I love the old TSR modules. They're some of my favorite things to sit and read. Reading this for making this video, it took me back to so many memories. How dangerous this module really is. I ran it as written at that old club I talked about, and I think of a group of about 12 that went in, and it might have been a little bit more. I think I had 2 or 3 get out, and at that, they did not complete the mission. So high attrition in this, and again, that was old D&D, and I did play very lethal D&D at that club, simply because that was what was expected. That's how we played at that club. Where I'm running this now, my players are much more experienced. They would have exit strategies, things like that. The group I was running did not, and it was just a lot of fun. Sometimes it's just fun to stomp a party. Sometimes it's fun to watch a party stomp a dungeon. So that's it for this one. The next module in this set is going to be the Hall of the Fire Giant King, and we can see what the force is behind all these evil giants suddenly attacking humanity. What could the driving force be? You know what it is. So that's it for page 121. Please remember the Patreon. Thanks for watching. If you liked what you heard and saw, please like and subscribe. And I'll see you next time on page 121.